I have one very quick question for you. Where are all the dinosaur franchises? Hi, I'm Steve Parkhurst. I'm a video producer and filmmaker, and I have loved dinosaurs pretty much my entire life. The very first movie I ever saw in the theaters was The Land Before Time, and Jurassic Park continues to be one of my all-time favorite films. And I've always wanted more. The original Jurassic Park made $1 billion worldwide in 1993. When it was rebooted in 2015, Jurassic World made $1.6 billion. The one dinosaur franchise we have has been extremely successful, one of the most successful franchises of all time. Think about it. We have dozens of superhero franchises, from the X-Men to the MCU, the DC, EU, whatever it's called now, and for good reason. Superhero movies are, even now, very successful. And yet, unlike superheroes, we've still only got the one. And I've always wondered,
why?
In April of 1999, The Matrix swept into theaters, and it was immediately a massive critical and commercial success. The film quickly established itself as a modern action masterpiece, and within a couple of years, there were all kinds of imitators popping up. Movies like Equilibrium, The One, Vanilla Sky, and Wanted were some of the most obvious imitators, but the film's influences spread far and wide, particularly its aesthetics and its fight choreography. This is pretty normal in Hollywood. Big movies usually inspire imitators. For example, after Pulp Fiction, there was a rash of fast-talking lowlifes with unconventional story structures. So, why didn't Jurassic Park inspire a bunch of copycats? After all, it grossed more than The Matrix and Pulp Fiction combined. Jurassic Park was the biggest movie of 1993. It won 3 Academy Awards, and it ushered in a whole new era for the VFX industry. Where are all the imitators? I think it's worth looking back at what dinosaur movies were like prior to Jurassic Park. Also, I'm not sure if you can hear it on my mic, but my upstairs neighbors sound like they're having a bowling party. Dear God. You know, I love that for them. Anyway, prior to Jurassic Park, dinosaur movies had garnered a reputation as being either kitschy relics or kids' movies. The stop-motion effects pioneered in films like King Kong, 1 Million Years BC, and The Lost World might have been revolutionary at the time, but they'd aged pretty poorly by the 90s. Other dinosaur-like movies, like Toho's Godzilla films, relied on men in rubber suits. And while their use of miniatures and rear projection were impressive, they also tended to elicit chuckles from American audiences. So in other words, prior to Jurassic Park, no one was really taking dinosaur movies very seriously. And then that changed pretty much overnight. Suddenly, creatures that had previously been rubber suits or jerky stop motion were hyper-realistic and terrifying. Suddenly, creature features had gone from B-movie afterthoughts in children's films to being in the spotlight. So, yet again, why didn't Hollywood rush to imitate Jurassic Park? Honestly, I think the movie was simply too good. It's worth remembering that some of the best effects in the film aren't even CGI. Much of what you see in the movie isn't CGI, but incredibly complex animatronics. That meant that any studio trying to replicate Spielberg's success would have to not only create their own CGI dinosaurs, they'd also have to build new animatronics as well. And in copying such a successful, well-received film, they knew they'd inevitably be ruthlessly compared to it. Spielberg, it seems, cast an even bigger shadow than his T-Rex. But that didn't stop imitators of The Matrix or Pulp Fiction. It's likely they knew that they also wouldn't be as good as those films, but they plowed ahead anyway. I really think it's just because it was an easier lift, honestly. All you need to imitate The Matrix, for example, is some leather dusters, some gun props, and a little kung fu. And if your Matrix imitation bombs, you're not left with a full-size animatronic T-Rex sitting in your warehouse. Because Jurassic Park was such a huge leap forward in CGI and animatronics, most other studios couldn't simply rush a similar dinosaur movie into theaters. It would take years of investment and development. I think the other issue is that dinosaurs, unlike say superheroes, are a little more limiting in their story potential. Jurassic Park could technically be considered a sci-fi film, but it really would rather not be. Instead, it takes pains to be as close to the real world as possible. So if you wanted to copy Jurassic Park, you'd have to come up with a story that felt like it could happen in real life without relying on scientists cloning dinosaurs. Unless you wanted to risk litigation from Michael Crichton. Or you could lean into the fantasy elements, a la Journey to the Center of the Earth. But in the years before the Lord of the Rings trilogy, fantasy was a huge gamble and was often kind of lumped in with creature features as being unserious and for children. And my guess is that studios were unwilling to fork over $100 million or more on a fantasy film at that point. So that basically leaves hard sci-fi, which was more accepted at the time. Maybe you could use time travel, or space travel, or an alternate universe. I think that could have worked. But then things start to feel a little bit like a hat on a hat. Is this a dinosaur movie or a space movie? Are we in Jurassic Park or Star Wars? So my guess is that for those reasons, we never really got any competing dinosaur films in the 90s. Even the Jurassic franchise struggled to replicate its initial success as The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 witnessed diminishing returns. Other studios also saw those diminishing returns and probably got a little gun-shy. If not even Jurassic Park could sustain itself as a franchise, what was the point in taking such a big risk? And after Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, the franchise basically went extinct. And yes, I did change my shirt. I forgot I had made this one, and I figured this would be a good chance to advertise it, so yeah. Anyway, you can buy it online. I'll put the link in the description. Moving on. I'm not trying to say there were 0 dinosaur projects after Jurassic Park. Terra Nova was actually produced by Steven Spielberg. It was a hugely ambitious TV show that premiered on Fox in 2011. The show was moderately successful, it got decent ratings, but its massive budget kept it from getting a second season. In 2005, Peter Jackson followed up his Lord of the Rings trilogy with a remake of King Kong, and the first half of the movie features a fair amount of dinosaurs. But they disappear after that, and I'd be hard-pressed to really call it a dinosaur movie. Land of the Lost was a comedic remake of the 1970s TV show starring Will Ferrell. It could arguably be called a dinosaur movie, but it was also a box office disappointment. In 2015, the Jurassic franchise relaunched with Jurassic World, starring Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt. Jurassic World was another massive smash hit. It made $1.6 billion worldwide. Audiences were clearly ready to return to the park. And crucially, by 2015, CGI had become ubiquitous and relatively affordable. Unlike in 1993, it was now reasonable to assume other big studios could pretty easily crank out their own dinosaur movies. And there was clearly an audience for them. And yet, nothing. Okay, so that's not entirely true. There's actually a huge market of B-movie Jurassic World knockoffs that came out in this era. They have names like Triassic World, Jurassic Games, and Jurassic Domination, and they're exactly what they sound like. Pretty bad. Beard hairs. Jesus. No one tells you about that when you grow a beard. But the big studios still stayed away. Why? Even stranger? This time, the sequels to Jurassic World continued to be enormously profitable. They didn't make quite as much as the first film, but they didn't show the same steep decline that the first sequels had. My best guess as to why we still don't have multiple dinosaur franchises in the same way we have superhero franchises is that dinosaurs have fallen into kind of an uncanny valley of being both too big and not big enough. I know uncanny valley isn't really the right word here, but I don't know, just go with it. In other words, as Bryce Dallas Howard's character in Jurassic World plainly says,
no one's impressed by a dinosaur anymore.
In an era of bigger and bolder, the humble T-Rex has remained stubbornly T-Rex sized. Particularly after Warner Brothers finally got their MonsterVerse off the ground, dinosaurs just started to seem too small. I think ultimately the dinosaur subgenre went extinct basically as soon as it was born. In the 90s, it was just too difficult and too expensive, and by 2015, pop culture had passed it by in favor of kaiju, aliens, and superheroes. Essentially, there's only room for one dinosaur franchise. And even Jurassic World doesn't seem content with simply having dinosaurs. The first film invented a new genetically modified super dinosaur, the Indominus Rex. The second film, Fallen Kingdom, introduces human cloning as a major subplot. And the third film, Dominion, throws giant locust swarms into the mix while also dragging the original film stars back into the action. And now, in 2025, we're getting the next iteration, Jurassic World Rebirth, starring Scarlett Johansson. As of this recording, the movie isn't out yet, but it does appear to be something of a return to the franchise's roots. It's jettisoning the globe-spanning plot and massive cast of Dominion in favor of a smaller story, reminiscent of the original trilogy. Will audiences accept this return to a movie that's just about dinosaurs and not much else? Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, the Wikipedia entry does allude to ScarJo finding mutated experimental dinos on the island, so I don't know, man, put a pin in that. Either way though, even if Rebirth is as big of a hit as Jurassic Park and Jurassic World were, it seems unlikely to birth any serious imitators. Unless superhero movies are well and truly dead and studios are desperate to find something new, I think dinosaur fans will have to continue to content ourselves with just one franchise. All right, that's about it for me. Thanks for watching. Let me know your favorite dinosaur movie, if it isn't Jurassic Park for some reason. We can have a spirited argument about that. Also, I've got a new movie coming out soon called Sight Unseen. It's a horror movie. It is not a dinosaur movie, though I'd love to make one if any studios want to reach out. But anyway, check that out, and thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, do the notification. See you next time.